welcome back to Rip's Garage. It occurred to me that I haven't done an introduction to this car yet, so we might have a bit of a look around it and I'll explain to you what the project's all about. So this is my 1977 Gemini Coupe, or Coupe. It's a TC model and it's got a TX front grille, which is a little different to the TC grille. Unfortunately there's not much room in my workshop here, so I can't give you a very good view of it, but all the interior's out of it. You've got a seat there and the carpet and underlay and other seat guard are all on the roof, because I'm working on the interior at the moment, just fixing up some rust spots in the floor wells and doing some wiring, and all of this will be documented in this project series. But basically I've had this car for probably going on like maybe 14 or 15 years now, and the majority of its life it's been off the road just in storage. When I bought it, it had some work done to it by a previous owner, and I did a few other things. It's got its battery relocated to the boot here. Currently it's on charge because it's not being used. It's got a fuel cell in there with a surge tank. We'll have a look at that in another episode. But battery isolator because it doesn't get used very often, and a sealed sort of battery marine box. And it looks like it's got a little praying mantis has made his way in here and hasn't survived the winter. Anyway, we'll live in there. As far as rust goes, it's pretty good. There's really not much rust in it. I'm cutting a couple little bits out of the door pockets and the foot pans, the floor pans, but aside from that it's basically rust free. What I'll say, it's had some brake upgrades which I go through in the series, and some wiring. I'm currently doing some hidden wiring in the guards, which is why that guard's sitting up on the roof there. In terms of its motor, it's got a... I'll just put the camera down for a sec. So it's got a G-series motor, which these came out with originally, but in Australia they were a 1.6 litre, and this is a 2 litre. You could get the 1.6, 2, you could get a 1.8 as well. The 1.8s and the 2s came out in Rodeos and I think Troopies, Isuzu Troop Carriers, and they were branded by Holden. Anyway, so this one's a 2 litre from that engine family. It's got extractors. Aside from that, the exhaust is pretty standard. It's I think a 2.5 inch exhaust, maybe a 3 inch tip, something like that. It was done in the late 90s, so probably 3 inch. It's got fuel injection set up on it, which is off a Piazza, Holden Piazza. They're not very common, but you can put the Rodeo fuel injection off the 2.6 and the 2.4 litres on here. It's got electronic ignition. I've tucked that in under here. It's an Opto Spark, which is a bit of an obsolete sort of system. MSD 6A ignition box. And I believe it's a high compression engine. I think it's got the 1.6 head on it. So it does go relatively well, or it used to when I used to drive it. You can probably see down there that orange bar is the front anti-roll bar. This model I don't believe came out with a front anti-roll bar. Possibly the TDs, or maybe midway through the TCs they upgraded the suspension to radially tuned suspension. I think it was the TDs, and they came with front and rear anti-roll bars and stuff like that. But this one's been fitted with a bit of sort of racing suspension, I guess you'd call it. Pretty big front and rear anti-roll bars, which we'll have a look at down the track. It's got Coney shocks, front and rear. I believe they're adjustable and rebuildable. And it's got some bigger brakes there. At the front, they're 330mm calipers, what you'd commonly find on a sort of like late V series Commodore HSVs. And at the back, we've got just the standard rear Commodore discs, single piston caliper, which everything from VB onwards, sort of Commodores had those as standard. The interior is pretty much standard. It's just the black vinyl. I believe that was resprayed. Originally it was this sort of gold colour paint, and it would have been a brown vinyl interior, and someone's painted that in the past, and they just covered up with some cheap seat covers from the 90s. There was a big stereo, sort of there was a sub, 6x9s and all that on the parcel shelf, but I got rid of that. I wasn't very interested in the sound system. I wanted to lighten it up, and there was an amplifier underneath the front seat here. In terms of gauges, it's got that big tacho, which we'll probably replace with something a little bit smaller, less obtrusive. And it's got the cheap dash cluster, which has got the clock in it instead of a tacho there. And yeah, just the standard sort of gauges. That's about it. Oh, and it's got a temperature gauge there for the oil down underneath. A very old racing steering wheel. And that's about it. So my plans for this are to get it registered, get it running on Club Rego. And then once it's registered, I would like to keep working on it. It's going to need a respray because the paint's in terrible condition. When I did a bit of the door repair, which you'll see in one of the episodes, I actually taped up the guard before pulling the guard off, and when I pulled the tape off, it took the paint away with it. So it definitely needs a respray. The paint's in terrible condition. But aside from that, the respray, we're just going to get it running well, and then drive it around and down the track. I'd really like to lighten it up. I want to keep this engine in it because I just like the fact that it's sort of the original engine family. A lot of people put other engines in. You got like SR20s, CA18s. Anything will fit in here if you can get it engineered. But I quite like sticking to the original engine family. Get as much power out of that as we can, and just lighten the car up so it's nice and fun to drive. And I think it's already pretty light. It weighs like 900 kilos or so. But if we can maybe replace the bonnet with fiberglass, I won't worry about the guards because they're very light anyway. And the doors are quite heavy. Replace those with maybe some fiberglass units. Maybe get some Lexan glass. And that should lighten it up a fair bit and make it a really, really fun car to drive. So I hope you stick with me on this journey, and yeah, we'll see where it ends up. Thanks for watching.